So let's just do the twists. And then just a few tipping. Now let's just try some reaches up. So just trying to sort of flatten out the middle back. Reaching up and pulling the head right back. And then just down and head forwards. to look down on top of the fingers, so the back of the neck really stretching now. And now let's go sort of one at a time. So just really reaching up and just let the spine tilt to get as much reach as you can. So feel it coming from the opposite sitting bone, like it would if we were standing. So it's this hip here, up into this hand. And down. Okay, so the new thing that's come up, trying to line the outside edge. If you look down at your foot, you can see that the outside edge is pretty much a line, a straight line. So just trying to get the two outside edges aligned with the room. So your big toes are coming in quite a bit. So I remember Charles telling me that when he lived in New York, he had a Chinese Qigong teacher who apparently was very good. And he used to say that when you stand in riding horse, you have to have your heels out, otherwise you're wasting your time. Just help stretch across the sacrum and open that area up. This is nice because it's not too extreme. So you can either think in terms of the outside edges or the middle toe. And just really try and spread the toes. So your outside edges are facing forwards like two tram lines, but your little toes are trying to go even further out. They're trying to venture out. Your big toes are coming round and just pressing into the ground. The arms up. Even though the toes feel like they're coming around, we want the knees to be going out. So the knees are with the spirit, with the little toes, the little fingers, the peripheries that are trying to venture out from the center. Letting go round here. Feel the spine. Almost try to have it the same as it was when we were sitting down. So when we're sitting down, the pelvis rocks forwards a little bit, so as though your tail is going backwards. Recently, when we've been standing up, we've been trying to get it to go the other way, so it's a roll this way, so that the tail can go down the legs. Now we just want to find that middle point, that relaxed point between those two extremes, if you like. So the sacrum is heavy and it's dropping down. Press down with the big toes, and that will just help roll you into the outside edges. And it will also accentuate the arches, the inside arches of the feet, which is what we want. The feet are like limpets attached to a rock. They're attached because they're sucking at the ground. So it's sticking. The feet are sticking to the ground. And that draw, that pull, just comes from the mind in the Dantian, comes from your still quietness that's centered in the Dantian. And now let's just breathe it. What we're trying to do is get out of the head and into the body, so into the Danshen and ultimately into the heart. So here we're just trying to let the head move. So the head is swaying backwards and forwards, and also side to side a little bit, because the two arms are never quite in sync. Trying to keep the Danshen relatively stable. So as the head is swaying backwards and forwards, feel the tip of the tail doing the same thing. So now my tail is coming under. The tail and the head point in the same direction. And now my tail is just going back. So the spine is bending rather than tilting. We're always looking for the switch. So at the moment, my breathing is operating my head, and this is moving in sympathy, my tail. So ideally, we would like it all coming from the tail. So it's my tail reaching back that pulls my head back and breathes in, and the tail swinging forwards that brings the head forwards. So the big mistake really that we tend to make, we assume that we can go at this work the same way we go at everything, with the rational, clever mind, the educated mind. And that will always very much limit what happens and force it to fit some sort of rational box, some rational model, which it doesn't fit at all, really. So part of this thing of switching is just getting out of the rational mind, ordered, usual way of actually looking at things, and just getting into the wild spirit. And that very much just means switching from the head to the belly, really, or to the legs, to the lower body, from upper body to lower body. And it requires the spirit to intensify. So the rational way of looking at the world it just crushes the spirit, crushes the imagination. Takes the life out of the system. Let's just try with the hands out and just tilting the head this side, but again, not tilting the hips like this. Feel the dantian in the middle. So I tip my head to the left, but I'm trying to pull my tail under here as well. Feeling the tail this side, reaching down the right leg as my right hand tips over and down. Almost like you're trying to make a loop out of the spine like this. Bring a bit of energy into the hands just by rubbing them together. And then just place the hands either side of the sacrum, so you're bringing a bit of heat into the sacroiliac joints where the sacrum joins the hip bones. Feel the spine, like energy is coming down the spine and then branches out of the sacrum and down the legs in order to get into the ground. Keep the hands there and just turn gently one side, and then that will allow the side I'm turning away from to just release down the leg and then just turn back. So it's very gentle, and it's much more what you're doing with the mind than the body. So something in me has to just really relax across here. Keep the big toes pressing down so that you're going into the outside edge. I just want to feel the release from the sacrum down the leg. feel how cheerful and sort of upbeat your mind has to be to maintain this relaxation across the sacrum as we're turning. You're just trusting the energy, trusting your own spirit, really. So now just feel that there's something coming out of your sacrum and reaching down and clutching at the ground through your legs. And now let's just feel the other direction. So we also want the feeling that something from the earth is coming up my leg and grabbing my sacrum. Just move into this leg now and just feel the ground coming up the leg and just entering the sacrum. The sacrum is like the center, the central bone of the body from where the energy can go anywhere. So the energy wants to get up there and just infuse the sacrum from where it can just fizz up the spine or down into the other leg. And then I just move here, and the real sense that my movement and my emptiness inside is beckoning something up from the ground into my sacrum. So it's just full and empty, but just with a slightly more lively visualization, almost a sense of this, like a branch of ivy is sort of coming up my leg, like a growth, an infection, creeping up my leg and coming into my sacrum. The sacrum just begins to feel really big and almost swollen with energy. So you can imagine your own tentacle of energy grabbing the ground, allowing this tentacle of energy from the ground to come up into my sacrum and beyond. Feeling the two-way traffic. So something is going down my leg. So my weight is sinking down my leg, but the ground is coming up my leg. The mind has to be really clear and quiet and ferocious to allow it to happen. Make sure you've still got the feet. So the quiet mind can hold an image for an extended period. Feel the sacrum very much the center of the circle. So the quiet, still center and the noisy, energetic circumference. The arms are thrown out, but at the end of the line, they're drawn back in because they are stuck to the shoulders. The belly pulls into itself and the heart issues. The heart gives out. And turning strengthens both of those. Just bring it up. So attention posture, but again with the two outside edges of the feet parallel. So the big toes are touching or almost touching, but your heels are some distance apart. So the legs are trying to bend because my sacrum wants to get down and the ground wants to claim my sacrum and pull it down. But the front of the leg is straightening to balance so that I don't just fall down. So I just want to really feel the equilibrium, feel the balance that I'm under between the downward pull, which is not just gravity, it's the desire of this region to reach the ground. The upward, which is not just my legs pushing against the ground by tensing these muscles, it's a real sense that the ground has grown up my body and is wanting to express by sprouting out of my head just like a tree. Just be aware of the outside edges. The little toe is part of the outside edges. So the little toes are really important. We worked on that sort of thing with John. And there was a time when he was talking, we were doing a lot of energy work, and he used to talk about the feathers. So if you just come up into this shape, then it's like each joint has a feather that comes out of it. A little plume of energy, a little awareness that sort of just brings a brightness into the joints. And you can also consider, the American Indian headdress, with the beautiful eagle feathers. Yeah, so they obviously didn't wear those things just for decoration. It was somehow accentuating some aspects of the energy. So when you intensify and become fierce, you lose your smoothness. You're no longer an egg. You're much more like a hedgehog with these sort of spines of energy, these feathers that come out. So you can just imagine you've got these here. So if you find pictures of like primitive people, they often use paint and animal parts. So especially feathers, just like having a feather just sticking out of the hair here. It just makes, or just imagining it, just brings you into that sort of imaginative energy world that we've sort of lost. Feeling these feathers, and you can just imagine different colors. So when it's green, how is it different than when it's red? And so there's a sense that you've got this sort of center here that's quite dark and cold and ruthless. But at the other extreme, on your circumference, it's just really decorated, full of color and life. Okay, now let's just try a bit of that thing that we did last week with the energy points, but a bit differently. So more like we did it with John. So first, let's just work on the thymus just to start. Bringing the hands up and towards the thymus. And remember what we used to do? We used to just do like 3 little circles. Imagine there's like some energy there and you just want to catch a thread of it. And then you just tease that thread out. And then let your hands drop down. So we did this every week for about a year, I think. Bringing it up. So something in your mind brightens and opens up just to allow it to open up a little bit so that you can enter. Very gently, you just tease a filament And then just tug it out again, very gently, otherwise it will break. And then you just drop the hands down. And now you've got this filament of energy that's reaching out into the world. So let's do another one. So we just do that on all the points. So just the points we did last week, starting at the crown of the head, the point that's trying to pierce the sky when you really stretch the neck. And then the last one will be the perineum underneath. Just bringing the hands up, and then something in your mind just intensifies in order to open a hole there so that your hands can reach in. And then with your lagom point, the middle of the palms, you just do tiny little circles until you imagine you've caught a filament, and then you just tease it out. And now the fontanelle. Really imagine that fontanelle is opening like it was when you were a baby. Teasing. Feel that your hands are really alive. So the fingers really sort of flutter as you do it. So now the hairline. Emotionally, they're all quite different. And then just the middle of the forehead. And then just between the eyes. And then just the middle of the nose, where the bone is. And then the very tip of the nose. Above the upper lip, below the nose. And then the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So just imagine you're reaching through to that point. keep the big toes pressing down, keep the equilibrium in the legs, so the legs bending and straightening at the same time. And then just the upper lip. And then where the two lips touch. And then just the edge of the bottom lip where it becomes your chin. And then just the fold here. And then the Kirk Douglas dimple. He was someone who had great spirit. And then just the point of the chin. And then just underneath, about halfway towards the back. And then just the fold where the under chin touches the throat. So just above the Adam's apple. And then the Adam's apple. And then this lovely soft spot just above the sternum. Feels very vulnerable, this. And then the thymus, so the ridge of the upper sternum. And then the mid heart, the middle of the sternum. And then the deep lower heart, so the xiphoid cartilage that's just attached to the bottom of the sternum. the solar plexus. Feel the navel and the solar plexus, so like a point halfway between them. And then the navel. And then the dantian. And then the base of the penis or the clitoris, so the pubic bone really. And then the vagina or the testes. Feeling where they join to the body. And just tugging at that point. And then the perineum, so just dipping down. Now just bring the hands up to the top one. Bringing the energy down through them. We're just feeling each one, so it goes click, 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 click. So we do 3 of these. And then one more. Come back into riding horse. Outside edges. It's really nice concentrating on the outside edge when you do the form. It just makes it rounder and it leaks less and it just gets a lot softer and more open across the back. Feel the feathers. Just imagine that from each joint, there's like a feather or a plume of energy that comes out. So the elbows are the obvious one, and the knees. But then you've also got like the wrists and the ankles. So you can think of like Hermes and the wings on his heels. But then the shoulders, you can imagine big growths coming out of the shoulders, and similarly from the hips. And then the sacroiliacs as well. So you've got something just sort of gushing out, really. Just imagine each cranial plate, they can move. There's a richness around each plate. Something from the ears, the Indian headdress. Remember those headdresses? They had like a mane of feathers that swept down the back. So that's like the spine. Each gap between the vertebra is a joint, and so there's like a feather that comes out of there as well. And this detail, it's alive. And it's your life, but it's not a life that that the mind has ever had anything to do with. And now let's just get down to earth. So let's finish by just squatting down. So we want the proximity of the ground to really stimulate the Danshan area. So the brain in the belly that we're trying to reconnect to. Our wild aspect. And just trying to get the two sides of the body, the left and the right, to separate from each other. So when they separate, especially if you put the hands on the floor, it's easier to feel in a way. So when you put the hands down and the two sides of the body separate, it feels like the ground is a bit unstable. Like the two hands can move against each other a little bit. And the same with the feet. It's more difficult with the feet because we're so used to blocking it out. And of course, the ground isn't moving. So what it is, it's something inside me is moving, which I just interpret as the ground because I'm not used to that thing inside me moving. So the two sides separate sufficiently for them to start playing with each other. Like two brothers messing around. Just straighten one of the legs, so just doing a bit of stretching. So just using this elbow to push this knee out. So I'm trying to push myself into the outside edge of this foot. Moving across. So when we go into the outside edge, we have to be careful that the little toe doesn't get crushed. We want the little toe to really extend. So this thing of the feathers, it's very much the little toes and the little fingers really sort of feeling as though they're lengthening. And you can get that in the form as well. It's the little fingers and the little toes where the activity is. Index finger, thumb, and the big toes, where the stability and the control is. So something is really extending here. I'm fierce with the mind, so I'm inside, something in me is really screaming this little toe out. Feel the ground, earthing the head through the hands, really. So I can't stay with the ground and with my noisy mind. I have to make a choice. Extending through into the little toe. The best antidote to depression is madness. So there's just this wild fierceness. into the middle, really getting down. So with a wide stance. That we're trying to wake up a wild animal inside ourselves. And then back up. And then just up. Just try riding horse. It's quite a wide, but again, with those outside edges forwards. Feel all of this detail. So John used to say, when you get it right, when the spirit really comes up, you feel like a Christmas tree with all the lights turned on. So like each one of these points is a bit like a light, and then you've got all these feathers that are reaching out. So imagine a cat or a dog, when their hair stands on end, when they get alarmed. So what is it in you that has to tighten up and really wake up to make your hackles rise, to make your feathers extend? So when the spirit's really up, you don't feel the pain. It is a bit like a drug that's strung you open, just made you braver and more willing to fight. Breathe through the small hole a little bit, just to really clench the Dan Chen. Bring it up. So into our new attention posture. So again, with the outside edges parallel. And just with a real feeling for the little toes. So the little toes are on the tram lines. There's like a sort of sense of mischief in them, and they're wanting to just venture off course. Feel the two tentacles coming out of your sacrum and reaching down into the ground. So something in you is hungry for the ground, but similarly, the ground is hungry for you. So there's two tentacles coming out of the ground and just really claiming your sacrum and Dan Chen. These muscles are working, but in a very sort of elastic way. You don't want them to freeze and become rigid. So they're squeezing at the ground in order to allow this filling energy from the ground, but also sucking it. So something in me has to suck at the ground to encourage it to come up. And that comes up all the way to here and beyond. Feel the 2 feet separate. So there's always this play between them, a play that what we'd like it to produce is predominantly a turning, a shifting from side to side. That's like a lightness in the mind. Place one hand on your min-meng and just the other hand at the back of the neck, and just feel these 2 points. So the one here is like the equivalent of the min-meng on the cervical spine. So because the back is difficult to access, we tend not to work on it, but there's as many points on the back, if not more. So ideally, if you had like a training partner, you'd do each other's back. So when you're doing it with another person, you just use one hand. So you just tease at the point with one hand and then just pull it out. Feel the middle fingers as this extending line that's going up through the crown of the head and piercing the sky.